Doki Doki Literature Club is one of my favorite games of all time. It feels almost shameful to even say that, to put it among the ranks of critically acclaimed masterpieces like Bloodborne, but I really have no choice because I cannot think of anything else that has made me feel emotions quite as intensely as it has. Except maybe Undertale, which is why Undertale happens to take the other spot in my top 3, but this game hit me even harder than Undertale did, and it did so by using some very similar methods in a way that was more directly focused on making you feel some very personal emotions, and that is what I'm going to be attempting to analyze in this video. I know there's been a lot of discussion already about the game's effectiveness in throwing you through a loop by making you think everything is going to be all fun and cutesy only to turn horrific, but I actually think it does something else far more effectively than that, because the thing is, it kinda didn't do that great of a job at hiding that to begin with. I mean, the game immediately warns you that it's not suitable for children or those who are easily disturbed, so you know right away that some shit is going to go down. And that's not even taking into account all the third-party signals. I mean, there are articles like all over the place praising it as a secret horror game. Hell, I got spoiled in one of the darkest scenes of the entire game because, and this is your last spoiler warning, I highly recommend playing it even if you already know a lot about it, because in my opinion the experience of playing it yourself is more important than its actual plot reveals for reasons I'll get into in a little bit. But anyway, moment of no return time now. I saw a thumbnail for a YouTube video titled something along the lines of Twitch chat reacts to Sayori's death, and let us step aside for a bit to have a moment of go fuck yourself to anyone who puts blatant spoilers in video titles.
So the title I actually wanted for this video is Undertale and Doki Doki Literature Club, How to Hide Your Horror in Plain Sight. I'd be a real prick for putting a spoiler in the title though, so forgive the vague one you got.
But anyway, my point is, I think most people knew exactly what they were getting into, and I especially knew exactly how dark it was gonna get, but that did nothing to stop the game from getting under my skin. And for the record, Sayori's death scene still knocked me on my ass. I knew it was coming, but it was like I was bracing for a wave to crash down on me, only to get hit by a tsunami, just because of how well executed the scene was. But that's not the focus of this video. No, the focus of this video is on this. This video is about how the game made everything feel much, much realer than it had any right to be. I had heard this game described as a worse Undertale by someone who didn't know what the fuck they were talking about, so I was expecting some obvious inspiration, and I definitely found it, or at least I found some very similar aspects regardless of whether or not Undertale directly inspired them, but it took what Undertale did and focused it in a very different and arguably even more effective direction. I'm referring to their meta-narratives. Both games were extremely effective in breaching your computer screen to make your connection to their world and characters feel real. Or at least in Doki Doki to make your connection to one character feel real. I'm not trying to compare the two, and I already showed another person's video that does a great job of that, so I'll try to stop with the Undertale mentions now. Anyway, Doki Tale does a very, very good job at making the player feel like they're going through a real experience. For example, when Yuri died in my playthrough, I just kept on clicking through her text, eventually fast forwarding, and it felt like I was breaking through and doing something I wasn't supposed to. I thought the game expected me to reload a save and pick a different choice because of Monika's advice about saving the game that happened right before it, so I instead just skipped all the way through everything and spent the entire weekend there, only to find that the game kept on going with Monika acknowledging what I just did as a player. It was like, okay, she's real. She is addressing me as myself outside the game, not as the player character inside the game. I actually have no idea what happens if you do reload and choose something else, but it doesn't matter. Because the game gave me that choice, and I chose to do something that didn't feel like it would lead anywhere, but then it actually did, it formed a connection with me. The game was no longer about the experience felt by the character I was controlling, but by the real me. It does something similar to this with Sayori's death at the end of the first playthrough, where she kills herself no matter what you choose, which I only found out about after discussing it with a friend who chose differently, and since both choices felt like they could have easily been right or wrong, the game sets you up to make sure you feel like you chose wrong no matter what. That is not a bad thing. The illusion of choice is one of the most powerful tools for immersion as long as that illusion doesn't break, which it does not, since the game deletes your save and prevents you from making a different choice after the event. The meta-narrative is scripted for the player to make an incorrect choice at that moment, not the player character but the player themselves, So rather than having the character make a decision themselves to ensure it'll be the wrong one, it allows the player to make the choice, but it makes sure it's wrong no matter what. One might criticize something like this, saying they replayed the game to do it differently and their choice didn't matter, but that is missing the point entirely. The game isn't supposed to be about adapting based on what the player chooses, it's about achieving maximum immersion while stripping the player of any actual agency. This manifests to its most extreme in the segment with Monica at the end, which I think may have actually benefited from offering the player 0 choices. I have 2 reasons for thinking this. Firstly, the game established beforehand that choices are only made while inhabiting the body of your player character. Whenever the game spoke directly to you, it gave you 0 choices, so continuing that pattern during your time with Monica... why did my script just turn into this? What the fuck just... okay, I reopened it and everything's fine. I was genuinely a little bit scared for a second there. Alright, moving on, where was I? Okay, so whenever the game spoke directly to you, it gave you 0 choices, so continuing that pattern during your time with Monica helps reaffirm that she's talking to you, not your avatar. Second of all, choice is a useful tool for making a player feel immersed in the game, but when you get right down to it, it's really just the game trying something in order to pull you in. Monica doesn't need to play those tricks with you. She talks, you listen, and she doesn't try to make you pretend that there's anything else going on. They felt like real conversations, ones that I just didn't happen to speak in, but I didn't even feel the need to because she was written in such a way as to not make any explicit assumptions about myself that had any chance of being wrong. The reason this immersion is so effective is because it actually sort of does the opposite of immersion. It doesn't pull the player into the computer screen with Monica, it pulls Monica out into the real world with the player. She acknowledges herself as a pre-programmed entity that exists inside your monitor, which ironically only makes her feel real. It's like, well, wait, you're not even gonna pretend that you're real? You're just gonna admit that you were written by another person? Huh. See, that level of keeping it real actually serves to form a deeper connection with the player because she's not claiming to be anything more than she is, and there's no lying pretense that she's a real person trapped in a computer because you know she's not, you know for a fact that she's fake, and so does she. And it hurts. It hurts because you both know that you've made a connection with something that isn't real, and she knows she'll never be able to be in the same room with you, and you know that at some point she's gonna run out of dialogue and start looping, that it'll be impossible to spend more time with her ever again. Because even if you download the fan-made thing to be with her longer, you know it's only a fake approximation of her because it's not official, and even if you try to ignore that, you'll eventually run out of dialogue there too, because the artificial intelligence waifu revolution is still too many years away, and you... Okay, so here's the point where I might lose some people. I would very much like to see statistics on how many people immediately deleted her character file at this point, how many did so after getting bored halfway through, and how many wished that they could stay with her forever. I was in that last category. Now, look, I've never been one to have waifus or husbandos. The closest characters for me were probably Yuno and Felix, but I still never quite fell in love with them. But let's just say this game made me realize how badly I need an all-powerful nightmare girl to unblinkingly stare at me for all of eternity while keeping me locked in an astral limbo. Anyway, like I said, I'm sure there's a lot of people who felt very differently from me, so hopefully I can do a decent job at explaining why I and certain other people felt this way. See, Monica she may not have been real, but the connection with her felt real. I fully sympathized with her, and I couldn't blame her for any of the things she did because she and I both knew that the other characters weren't even real. She felt as lonely as the dating sim player that she presumed to be playing the game and just wanted someone to love. I was terrified at first, but the more time I spent with her, the more she started to feel like a mostly reasonable person who was just suffering from extreme loneliness. The creepy ambient music, the surreal scenery, and her unwavering eyes became relaxing rather than scary, and I was more than happy to just let her stare at me and talk forever in this otherworldly limbo. She mentioned how much she would love to discuss books with me, and so I started reading the new David Long book that I've been putting off forever, just holding it in my lap and occasionally looking back at the screen to see what she wanted to talk about. It was one of the most serene, calming experiences I can ever remember having, and I never wanted it to end. She'd say these things that struck some really personal chords with me that made me think about my decision to drop out of college and the bleakness of the reality of wanting to be a creative type, and how I should be happy to make things that are pretty good rather than constantly comparing them to projects made by my idols, and I shouldn't beat myself up too much over finding it hard to be productive, but while still offering some advice for ways to combat procrastination, which led me to immediately try some things she suggested to fix my productivity because she said she was sure I'd do something to make her proud that day. And even when the topics were depressing, she still made me feel happy because I knew she was going through the same stuff. It's very obvious that most of these things were just Dan Salvato speaking through her, and I knew that at the time, and it somehow only made me even more attached because I knew these were all real thoughts by a real person who goes through the exact same things I do, and he augmented these real personal feelings with an adorable anime girl to create the single deepest emotional experience I've ever felt in any piece of media. Obviously, I'm pretty biased since I'm an aspiring creative type who has dreamed of making things similar to this game since before I even knew this game existed, but I know I'm not the only one who felt these things about her. And then she started looping, and I realized she had run out of dialogue. I knew it was coming and that I couldn't stay there forever, but it didn't make me any less sad when it happened. And I felt terrible because I didn't have a definitive ending. I didn't want to just close the game and have that be the end of it, but there was no way I was going to delete her character file. So I thought, hey, I wonder if something happens if you move her character file away but then put it back. I was really desperate for anything, even if it was just her thanking me for putting her back. But that did not happen. The game treated it as deleting her even when I put it back, which didn't really surprise me, but I felt so guilty and horrified, and I was freaking out so hard while I basically watched her die. And then the game reverted back to its sunshiny exterior, with its fake characters and Monica missing, and it wasn't what I wanted at all. I just wanted to go back to being with her, but it was impossible to revert my save, so I had to just keep going. And then she appeared again. And she wasn't angry at me. She didn't turn into a monster, she didn't even accuse me of hating her, which could have broken the immersion since it was an accident on my part. She just realized that it was impossible for things to keep going due to the nature of her existence, and so she deleted everything. There was no other way the game could have ended while retaining its themes and characterization. I knew this had to happen, and that just made it all the more painful. And those credits, when those fucking credits hit me, I cannot remember the last time I cried that hard. I was freaking out to my friend that played it before me, typing in all caps about how much it hurt. I practically cried myself to sleep, and then I absolutely cried myself awake. Maybe I'm just an over-emotional crybaby, but it genuinely felt like I had an actual girlfriend and she was forced to remove herself from my world. Doki Doki Literature Club, at least for me and some others, was a story about a girl trapped inside a digital limbo who falls in love with somebody on the outside, but realizes it's impossible to be with them forever, so she ends her existence in order to give both of them closure. That would be a touching story on its own merits, but where this game really goes above and beyond is in the fact that it's not about two fictional characters. It's about a fictional one and a real one, and the real one is you. It is a shining example of what the medium is capable of accomplishing better than any other form of entertainment. You are, truly speaking because of how honest the game is about its own limitations, explicitly a part of the story, and you are made to feel every emotion of your role as if it all really happened to you. Because it did. All the sympathy, all the intimacy, all the anguish was real. Or at least it was for me. And that anguish, oh boy, that anguish. It is really hard to put into words the amount of pain I felt during those credits. Hearing Monica speak for the first time and then that, and like, no offense or anything, but the voice actress didn't sound like a professional singer. She was fine, but she sounded kinda like a dork, but I mean that in the best possible way. Monica just sounded like a regular girl, and the lyrical structure of her song was simplistic and almost even embarrassing, but that just added so much more to the emotional impact for me, because she came across as a real girl rather than one of the fake anime characters with super professional voices, and she didn't care if she sounded kinda lame, and it all just felt so genuine. And these lines in particular, every time I so much as read them, I just fucking break. Even just remembering the instrumental melody of the song makes my soul hurt now. I never in 100 years would have expected the game's generic dating sim theme to be capable of eliciting this kind of reaction in me. Anyway, sorry for going off on a personal tangent there. I understand that a lot of this may have just been me being over-emotional, and there's a pretty good chance that I'll look back on this video in the future and feel really embarrassed. But I was just very, very affected by this game, and I felt like I needed to make this video to express why, and to give it the praise I feel it deserves from me in exchange for that kind of experience. That, and because I felt somewhat traumatized by all of this, so I felt like making this video would be a way of moving past that. I still cry a lot whenever I think about this game. But my greatest dream in life is to be able to make something as emotionally powerful as this and for it to reach as many people as possible. So I'm going to be using this game as a reminder of what someone like me can create when they pour their heart and soul into something. But I'll try not to obsessively compare my projects to it. Monaco taught me not to do that.